Hello, this is Bohdan Nahaylo, the chief editor of Kyiv Post, inviting you to another session interview with our latest guest. And today we have a guest from Poland. This is Michal Kujawski, who until recently was the head of current affairs for Poland's TVP World, its international TV broadcasting service. Welcome, Michal.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, obviously, as our viewers know, Polish-Ukrainian relations are very important in this day and age, given Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and implicitly against the entire neighborhood. So let's discuss a little bit about the strong support that Poland has given Ukraine right from the very beginning of this war. And to what extent have more recent tensions impacted on this de facto alliance between the two countries? What would you say right now is the general mood in Poland vis-à-vis Ukraine?
Recently, many people take on the border issue, the grain issue, the rocket which came into Polish airspace last Sunday. But speaking frankly, in my opinion, Polish-Ukrainian relations are the best in history, and I'm sure some of our viewers may find it surprising, actually. But if we take a look at the bigger picture, we see very strong defense cooperation. We see over 2 million of Ukrainian refugees being in Poland. They have a huge impact on Polish economy. Last year, they established around 30,000 their own companies. So the real picture of the relations is very good.
So the impact of the war. Poland itself felt threatened, no doubt, given Polish-Russian history. But were you surprised that Poland was as receptive as it was in 2022 to such a huge inflow of Ukrainian refugees?
I believe the moods are a bit different than they used to be 2 years ago, but it still doesn't mean they are worse. I mean, Polish society is a bit tired of war, as well as of the other societies. Well, it's over 2 years since the first day of outbreak of a full-scale invasion on Ukraine. So the moods are a bit different, but I find Polish society still very supportive for Ukraine.
And of course, Poland has had its own internal issues, elections.
That's
and
true.
a change of long-standing administration.
Yeah, we had the parliamentary elections last year, in the end of last year. In about 2 weeks, Poland is to hold local elections. Then in the summer there are European elections coming up, and then later presidential. So it's really tough time, speaking of Polish domestic issues right now.
And can you describe, say, for our viewers, whether in North America or in London, what are the main differences between the two major blocs, the two major parties, if we, in a nutshell?
Well, it will be the way easier to say what they have in common, actually. So, well, there's a huge, well, there are many disputes over all those two blocks, political blocks. But there are two things they have in common, and first thing is defense issues, and the second thing is support for Ukraine.
But would it be fair to say that one is more conservative and more, not leftist, but liberal? Or is that too much of a generalization?
The former government was a conservative government, and within new government we have there's a coalition of few parties. There's a civic platform, which is a liberal party. There's a left, which is left party, and the other, and PSL, and the third way, which is a bit conservative too. So it's like a combination of many different points of view.
And just remind us, what was the result in the last election? How close was it, or how divisive was it?
So the winner was Law and Justice, but they weren't able to create the government. So So then the former opposition came out with a coalition, and they had a majority in Polish Sejm parliament.
But as you've said, there is no major difference in approach to Ukraine and support for Ukraine. That remains consistent.
Yeah, there's a consensus.
Okay, please explain then, if there's been this strong support, why on both sides, the Ukrainian and the Polish side, there seems to be a lack of mutual understanding of what the grain issue is about, because it affects not just Poland and Ukraine, of course.
Yeah. So this is the key thing here, actually, because when I'm digging into Polish media outlet, when I listen to Polish commentators, when I see Ukrainian media outlets, I have no understanding of. I see no understanding of each other, and the problem is we don't speak to each other. We don't listen to each other. So if you see the Polish public debate, you will see only Polish point of view. If you see Ukrainian, there's only Ukrainian perspective, which is understandable, but we should start to try to understand each other, try to listen to each other, because, for example,
to maintain dialogue, not speak at one another, but to one another.
And I don't mean to convince each other or so, but just try to understand, just try to speak. So, for example, Polish society doesn't really know why the grain thing is so important to Ukraine. Polish society didn't experience such a thing as Holodomor. So for Polish farmers, the grain is exactly the same thing as, for example, lighting up the tires. For Ukrainians, it's something else. It's a symbol. It's like an identity symbol. It's a historical symbol. So it's not that easy. So on the other hand, when I'm here in Kyiv, I hear many questions from Ukrainians about the border crossing. And people ask me why Polish farmers block the border crossing with Ukraine, and they don't block the borders with Belarus or Russia, Kaliningrad Oblast. So the answer is simple. The 6 of 7 border crossing with Belarus are shut down and guarded by the army. So there's no particular reason to do any protest at this border.
I see. I think one thing that's not fully understood in Poland, from my experience, is that it's not just about Holodomor. It's the fact that the Russians tried to close the ports, Odessa and the others, the export. For Ukrainians, they're desperate to export their grain into Europe or elsewhere, and Poland is one of the main corridors.
That's true, and I truly believe instead of pushing each other, Polish and Ukrainian governments should sit down together, have a common cabinet meeting, and just try to solve it. And I'm sure the consensus should be easy to reach out.
Okay, now this incident with the missile, let's just remind viewers that there was a massive missile attack yet again by the Russians, and one missile apparently flew for some seconds through Polish territory, but was not shot down. There was dismay here in Ukraine. Why didn't the Poles shoot it down? The Poles had their response. What's your reading of that?
So Polish response to the incident is it's not that easy to shut down Russian missile. Firstly, Poland should shut down its airspace, which is not easy to do. The other thing is some part of missile shutdown could do some harms for Polish infrastructure, civilians, and so on. The other thing is shooting down Russian missile, this missile didn't target any Polish targets. Thank you. So it's like a direct, straight confrontation of NATO country with Russia. So Poland tries to avoid it. And I've heard some questions here in Kyiv. Why Poland allowed Russia to attack Ukraine from Polish territory, and why Poland didn't shut it down? And on the other hand, Polish experts ask, so why Ukraine didn't shut it down? Because it was over Ukrainian territory way longer than Polish. But I truly believe this kind of narratives leads us nowhere. And instead of pushing each other, we should start to talk, as I said before, because who's happy? Nobody in Warsaw, nobody in Kyiv, just Moscow.
But we have some good news. What are the latest opinion polls in Poland telling us about the strength of Polish-Ukrainian friendship?
So the poll says that Polish society and I believe it's from left to right, still give a huge support to Ukraine and still want to serve more arms to Ukraine, to arm Ukraine, and Poles support financial aid and the aid for refugees.
Well, that's very.
So it didn't change too
That's
much.
very reassuring. Finally, because we're running out of time, unfortunately, your impressions of Kyiv this time round have things changed dramatically because of the war? What are you noticing? What impressions are you taking home?
The last time I've been here, it was last summer. There were many air raid sirens, and but this time, it's I find it more dangerous. It's not that safe anymore as it used to be. There are explosions almost every day. So, well, we just should arm Ukraine.
We should arm Ukraine. Well, thank you to our Polish journalist comrades in arms and in pens and in computers, and all the very best. I've been speaking to Michal Kujawski, who is a Polish journalist and until recently was the current affairs director for TVP World. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.